Welcome back to the third episode of The Drive to Dayton. I am your host, Michael Roth, alongside my other host, TJ Petros. We've got a jam-packed episode for you, little shorter than usual, but we're going to make sure to cover all the news and notes that you need to know heading into this Christmas break that I'm sure students and also educators are looking forward to, like TJ.
Much.
And And with that being said, TJ came up with our introductory question, and that is, are there too many holiday events and showcases? So I'll let you take the first crack at this question.
It seems like as the years go on, there are more and more and more and more of these events. As somebody whose job it is, to keep up with these events, and I try to make a list and get schedules and track down, event coordinators and figure out who's putting things together and where at, and schedules constantly changing and being moved around. It's like when did there be like when did this happen? I don't remember whether it was when I was in high school or when I first started, just like the sheer amount of showcases that we have right now. So honestly, I do think there are too many of them. I think when you have too many events like this, it kind of loses the value a little bit. Um, and I don't know if I was a school. I don't know if I would want to really lose a home game and opt of playing in one of these events, unless it was, a staple, something that's been around a while. You fly into the hoops, your play-by-plays. Um, but yeah, I just don't get what I guess the ROI is for some of these teams to go play a 10 a.m., 11:30 in the morning game on a Sunday, in front of 75 people. I don't see the benefit in that. But yeah, I think there are just too many of these events.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest point on if there you are arguing that there are too many. Some of these tournaments have just little to no crowd. There's no environment at the game. So I would say that maybe there's not too many events, but there's like some events that have just like no direction and no like feel, where some of the Columbus versus Dayton City, like that has a theme, like it's organized, you got a bunch of regional teams, other events, even they don't have to have a specific theme, but if you have all the top teams from the Akron Canton area or all the top teams from the Sandusky area or the Dayton area, at least those events have like a theme and you can get more parts of the city to your event and you can see all these different teams that know each other. Like the Battle for the Berkey does a good job getting small town teams. They also do a couple local teams. So that's just a couple examples. It's the events that have no sort of direction and they're just like, hey, we're gonna have 5 games here. We don't care who the 10 teams are that play. We're just gonna grab 5 games where it doesn't help the teams because there's nobody in the stands, not a lot of college coaches, not a lot of media. So as long as the events have a very specific goal and like order of operations, I think that every event, like I'm cool with all these events because it's easier for guys like me and you to see 4 games in one day at one location. You don't have to move around. It's great. It's just the events that don't bring in the same quality of teams and are pretty empty where it's not really worth it to be playing in those events. So it's sort of a catch 22 for are there too many?
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah, and as a scout, obviously, right, these events come in, and awfully, they're awfully handy, especially during the season. It's a way for me to see, hey, 8 to 10 Columbus teams in one day, saves me a few trips down that way. But when you have so many of these events, of course, some are going to be bad. You know what I mean? Like you got all these teams in Ohio that play in leagues, right? They maybe only have 7 or 8 non-conference slots that they're able to use for, events or, just whoever they decide to play. But yeah, of course, there are going to be some events that, that take a hit. And I think we see that. I would love going off of what you said about the themes. I think when there's some sort of direction, like you mentioned, it adds an extra like incentive. I've had a few people reach out to me recently about potentially doing like an Ohio versus Michigan event, similar to kind of what we do in Midwest Live, but during the high school season. I think that would be awesome.
Yeah,
If you get,
and
we
even
get
the
5 games in, Toledo between Northeast and Northwest Ohio teams versus, Western Michigan teams, I think that would be big time.
And even they don't have to be the top level teams. I mean, look at the IVC Classic in February. That has a directional theme. You get some of the top teams playing against each other in Eastern Ohio. I went to the Alley Classic one year. That was a solid event because you got a lot of the better teams from Southeast Ohio around there. So it doesn't even need to have like your top teams with all these Division One prospects. Just needs to be well organized, have a theme, and bring out some members to the community because there really is nothing worse than an 11 a.m. game between two average teams to start an event where there's 50 people in the crowd. But we move along to last week's recap. And TJ, you were busy around Northeast Ohio and even sprinkled in a trip to Columbus. So talk about who you saw last week.
Yeah, so on Tuesday, I went over to Brecksville to catch a home matchup with Solon. And it was not a pretty game on either side. I want to give credit to Solon. I thought that their ball pressure and just the way that they sped Brecksville up, it seemed. I thought that was a huge factor. They also out rebounded Brecksville, I believe, by like 10 or 12 total rebounds. Just a solid, team effort by them. And definitely in a game that I thought Brecksville would have been, favored maybe even by, close to around double digits. So I thought that was a really big win for Solon on the road. Saturday, I made a trip down to New Albany, which was, I realized as I was walking into the gym down there that it was my first time ever at New Albany High School. Uh, a cool gym, a bit of a throwback kind of feel to it. I liked it. It was one of those schools that when you pull up, you have no idea where the gym is. So you just park and just try to find one straggler and just follow him into the gym. So it was one of those. New Albany is a bit banged up. Senior Miles Jackson didn't play due to back spasms. They had someone else in their top 8 who I believe broke their wrist in the game against Gahanna Lincoln just the day before on Friday. So New Albany was a little beaten, battered, and I think Big Walnut did a great job of taking advantage of it. And Big Walnut, even though they lost, I think they lost to Westerville South on Friday. I thought they bounced back with a really big win against one of the better teams in Central Ohio in Division Two. Man, there was a plethora of guys on Big Walnut. And this is a team that I think is going to be really good again next year. They'll lose senior big man Braden McCruder, but they'll bring back junior guard um, Hatfield, right? Who I think he's finished with 15 points in that game. He played really well. I thought he did one of his more efficient jobs scoring the basketball. Sophomore Eli Stump, I believe he led all scorers with 17 points. Sophomore Carson Shaw, who I think is a major sleeper in Central Ohio sophomore class. I believe he had about 8 points or so, just a pure shooter. Then they have another sophomore, Jackson Bowers. We've been hearing rumblings about a few middle school guys they have coming up. So Big One is a team to keep an eye on, not only this year, but I think the next 2 years, they're really going to have a chance to make some noise down in Central Ohio. And then lastly, on Sunday, I made my way over to Western Reserve. It was a little 14 two-game tournament between PDI Prep out of Urbana, the home school Western Reserve Academy, Andrews Osborne Academy, and Darrow School out of New York. Definitely nice to see multiple teams at once, especially these Ohio prep schools that play a bit of wonky schedules. We don't get to see them very often. So I'm thankful to Spire, Western Reserve, AIA for hosting these sort of events where you can see multiple games at one time. So yeah, a bit of a slower week for me. No events this weekend, but that's going to change really, really quick here. We'll talk about that here in a second.
Yeah, shout out to Big Walnut. A couple of those kids had big seasons on the gridiron, Brody Hatfield and Eli Stump. They had a huge upset over Massillon in the regional final. So Maybe a bit of a slow start with the loss to Westerville South, but a win over New Albany. Maybe they are getting on the right track on the hardwood. For my week, I spent Tuesday night in Russia, Ohio, watching some Shelby County basketball. The Raiders got a win over Botkins. They are now 5-0 with victories over Botkins, Jackson Center, and Minster already this season. I was really impressed with senior Benjamin York. He's a kid who last season was able to shoot the basketball, played a complementary role. This year, he's impacting the game in more ways than just shooting the ball, more active defensively, showing more ability to handle the basketball, create shots for other. And he's also sort of the guy that Rushi looks to set up to score on a lot of their set plays, whether that's baseline out of bounds or running shooters off pin down actions. Really impressed with York's growth year over year and becoming a leader on the team. I was also impressed with Dominic Francis. He's an X factor defensively, standing at 6'6" in the middle of the paint. He can block shots. He can switch on to guards. He just does a little bit of everything on the defensive end of the floor. And it's hard for these small town teams to score when you got a guy at 6'6" with length and athleticism. He also had a couple dunks to wrap up the game as Rushi was pulling away. And also, you can't forget about Braylon Cordonier. He did a nice job scoring in the paint, just an efficient power forward who doesn't take any bad shots. He moves the basketball, just a utility scorer. He's another very productive high school player. He'll be an all conference guy in the SCAL. Then Friday night, I stayed local in Cincinnati. I saw Cincinnati Summit Country Day remain unbeaten after they took down conference rival Purcell Marion on the road 53-36. Max Joyner with another double-double. He's been one of the top freshmen in Ohio this season, just very advanced physically, has shown shot making flashes, able to play above the rim, an elite rebounder for his age as well. It was also LJ Stock's first game of the season. He knocked down a couple jumpers, is a really quick twitch athlete. So, Summit Country Day, they got a big win over Harvest Prep to start the year and are even adding pieces now with Stocks in the mix. And for Purcell Marion, Chris Washington is a guy that I don't think many people know about at all. He's been one of the top 2027 scorers in Ohio, averaging 25 points per game through 6 contests this year. He was held to a season low 17 points against Summit Country Day, but he's an undersized guard who can really get to the basket very quick, shifty off the dribble, and he's had a great start to his sophomore season. So he's a name I'm sure people in Cincinnati will become very familiar with. And then on Saturday, I took a quick trip across the river to the John Turner Classic at Newport High School in Kentucky. Opened the day with Harvest Prep getting a victory over Connor. Khalil Daniels had a big game for Harvest Prep. Cincinnati Taft fell to Newport Central Catholic. Taft got a big conference win the night prior to open up their season. They were another team that had to start a little late due to football success, but Newport Central Catholic got the win. And Cincinnati Winton Woods, they remained unbeaten as they took care of Covington Holy Cross. Transfer Christian Wilkins is a big addition for Winton Woods, coming from North Carolina. He stands at about 6'4", makes shots on the wing, ability to run in transition. He's a kid who I'm hoping to see again against a little better athletes than what Covington Holy Cross was able to defend Wilkins with. A very intriguing prospect, unsigned in Ohio's 2025 class, probably one of the more talented kids that remain unsigned in Ohio's 2025 classes. A lot of the top talent is already off the board. And then speaking of unsigned 2025 talent, Kyron Granville Britton had a big game for Cincinnati Princeton as they got the biggest win of the day over Louisville Trinity. The Vikings are now 5-1 on the season. I was impressed with Granville Britton. He's looking thinner and in better shape than he was during the summer. If people remember, he's dealt with serious knee injuries throughout his career, was playing with a big brace during the months of June and July, and now he's got a smaller brace on his knee. He's moving quicker laterally, looks more explosive as a vertical athlete at the rim, and is currently averaging a double-double, shooting over 60% from the field. And last thing, we mentioned this event last week, wasn't able to attend, but Battle in the 740, quick recap. Columbus Walnut Ridge beat Huntington, West Virginia. Deion Johnson won MVP honors with 17 points, 8 rebounds, and 6 assists. Proctorville Fairland remained unbeaten with a 46-44 win over Eastern Brown. The Ashland Blazer got up huge on Kettering Alter before the Knights made a big fourth quarter push. A Blazer holds on for a 6 point victory. And Minford stays unbeaten with a 4 point win over Hilliard Davidson. It's an experienced group that is looking to finally break over that sort of convo postseason hump they haven't been able to get past with their 2025 group led by Bennett Kaiser and Miles Montgomery. So that is the recap for last week. TJ, we've got a bunch of marquee events this weekend in Northeast Ohio and Central Ohio. Why don't we start at Garfield Heights?
Yeah, I believe we have almost 10 different events that are going on this weekend. Cool part about it is they're spread out pretty nicely. You have Eastern Ohio, Northwest Ohio, Northeast Ohio, Columbus. I'm not sure. Yeah, and then we have a Southwest Ohio event too. So there's a little bit for everybody. If you want to get out of the house, see, some basketball games. We're going to kind of just quickly go through some of these with you. Don't want to spend too much time on it. But we have the NEO Youth Elite Christmas Classic, which is Saturday and Sunday at Garfield Heights. A few games that caught my eye. You have Warren Harding against Hawken on day one. Glenville against Wayne Memorial out of Michigan. So those who are in Ohio not familiar with Wayne Memorial, they have two of the better 2026 guards in Michigan with juniors Carlos Medlock and Jayon Allen. Definitely should be a really fun game against Glenville. I expect it to be up tempo, high scoring. And then Wayne Memorial actually turns around and plays Elyria on Sunday. So they have two games against two probably top 25 teams in Northeast Ohio. I'll be curious to see how they fare and how they do. Garfield Heights, the whole school, takes on Cleveland Heights. Regardless of what either team looks like on paper, that's always a fun game. Good environment, a lot of students and people come out for that one. Cleveland Central Catholic against Maple Heights. Interesting storyline in that game is sophomore King Young, who was one of the better underclassmen in Northeast Ohio a year ago as a freshman, transferred to Cleveland Central Catholic this past year due to a coaching change. So, he'll get a chance to go against his former team. Warrensville Heights and Lutheran East. This is a sneaky game for me, a game that I think could honestly be one of the better ones of the entire event. Warrensville Heights, not, overly talented, right? They don't have like the big names in Northeast Ohio, the Division I commits. But man, Coach Michi's got just a really scrappy, tough-nosed group over there. A team I thought had some bright moments last year, and it seemed like they've started the year off on a pretty good note this year as well. I know they played St. Ignatius, I believe it was their first game of the season, and it was a relatively close game. So I think that says a lot about what Coach Johnson has going on over there. Yeah, and then next, I mean, this is an event that I'll be at on Saturday, but that's the 5Cs Classic down at Capital University. I remember the first year that this event took place, and I can't believe we're already on year 6. I think it just kind of goes to show, how old we're getting, man, how long we've been around. The fact I think this year marks my 10th year covering Northeast Ohio and Ohio. So that's kind of a cool tidbit for me personally. But a few games that caught my eye on Saturday, you have Bishop Hartley against Lima Shawnee. I think that's going to be a really interesting clash of styles. I could see it going, a few different directions. I think if Lima Shawnee can, withstand Bishop Hartley's pressure, right? I think that's a game that, could be fun down the stretch. But that is a game also I think has a chance of getting bust wide open pretty early on. I think Bishop Hartley has made a few big statements this year, and they don't look like they're slowing down anytime soon. Westerville North and Louisville, how much fun is that going to be, right? I mean, you have seniors Ty Perkins and Micah Young over at Westerville North, right, along with a slew of underclassmen, Tyson Perkins, Tony Cornett, Damon King, and then Louisville is led by predominantly all seniors. I believe they returned like 7 of their top 8 guys from last year. I think Westerville North is going to want to press Louisville, and they're going to want to play fast and get up in them. And I think Louisville has shown over the years they do a really good job when teams want to play like that. You can look at that Lutheran East win last year at the Play-by-Play Classic. So yeah, it's going to be interesting, but I think that game
These
is really
teams
fun.
played at the Ohio State team camp last year, and I think Louisville got them pretty good. So it'll be interesting to see if Westerville North got any revenge on their mind. How many of those kids remembered
Yeah,
what
they.
happened in June?
I want to say two. It might have been 2 summers ago they played at Ohio State's team camp. They might have played again this year, but I do know they played at Midwest Live this year, and Louisville won, and I believe it was a really really close game, maybe 2 4 points. So these two teams, even though they're from two different regions of the state, they have a little bit of history. So I think it'll be
That's pretty
competitive.
fun.
Yeah, that is fun. I think that's a one little kind of caveat that the summer can provide for you. Then you have Olentangy Orange against Indianapolis Cathedral. I'm not big on national high school rankings in terms of teams, but I want to say one outlet had both of these teams ranked in the top 75 as far as public schools go across the country. So I think that's going to be a really fun one. Indy Cathedral has Notre Dame commit Brady Kaler. They're one of the best teams in Indiana, along with Olentangy Orange, who is my pick in Division One this year, and I think maybe the best team in Ohio, regardless of division this season. Newark and Richmond Heights play on Sunday. Olentangy Liberty and Delaware Hayes play on Sunday. That's a matchup that I think you very well could see, in the districts or, the regional tournament, so to speak, at the Columbus Fairgrounds. And then lastly, this has got to be like the banger of the event. I'm disappointed that I'll be missing it. We have Reynoldsburg and St. Ignatius. And those of you who remember last year, Ignatius senior Matt Ellis hit like a game-winning and one three-pointer with like under 5 seconds left to play. Was a phenomenal game, I believe, and with the double overtime. So that's going to be fun. I'll be curious to see if those two teams can, kind of live up to the hype and, rewrite history a little bit.
I was there
Reynolds,
last year. I think Ignatius was down 3 points. So Ellis hits the and
wow.
one three-pointer to tie the game, makes the free throw. And I think there was like 1.5 seconds left, and Reynoldsburg missed the shot at the end. So probably the best regular season, maybe the best overall game I watched all of last year were those two teams at Capital University. So I hope Columbus sells that place out and has it rocking because it was a great environment and game last year.
Yeah, and you know what the cool part about it is? I love that these two teams were like, let's run it
Run it
back.
back.
Yeah, you have an instant classic, probably game of the year a year ago, and then you're just like, let's do it again. Um, and then lastly, the last event that I want to highlight is the Alliance Christmas Classic over at Mount Union. A game that over there really caught my eye is Maslin Jackson against Alliance. So Alliance got off, to a really hot start. They were my team of the week. I believe it may have been last week. They started off 3-0. Maslin Jackson, right, who's been, probably a top 10 team in Division One, took a loss to Hoban, beat Hoover in a really close one. So I think both teams have something to prove here. I think Alliance is trying to kick down the door a little bit in Stark County. Maslin Jackson trying to stay on top. So that'll be a fun game. But yeah, those are some of the events in Northeast Ohio and Columbus. And then I know Roth has, some of the other events as well.
Yeah, I got Southeast Ohio, Northwest Ohio, and Southwest Ohio here. Starting in Southeast Ohio, the Clash at the Coliseum, hosted at Warren High School. Warren's 3-1. They're one of the better teams in Southeast Ohio. They play Williamstown out of West Virginia on Friday night. That's probably the marquee matchup of this whole event. And the host also plays River Valley on Saturday night. The Ironton Classic sees Proctorville Fairland take on a rival from across the river in Russell from Kentucky. That's a pretty solid game. Russell has a couple young pieces I saw last year who were pretty intriguing. Ironton and Minford meet in which would be a competitive game. There's always a bit of a rivalry, I feel like, between OVC and SOC teams in Southeast Ohio. Always some debate. What's the better conference? So we'll see if Minford can get a win for the SOC. South Webster plays Huntington Expression Prep South Webster, probably the best Division 7 team in Southeast Ohio. They're led by Eli Roberts, have a lot of experience. And then finally, Hargrave Military Academy plays Mount Zion Academy. Those two teams are loaded with Division One talent. So the most talented game you'll see in Southeast Ohio all year. Two prep schools, but still should be pretty competitive. Then we're going to move down to Cincinnati for the Queen City Christmas Classic on Friday. Cincinnati St. Xavier takes on Walton Verona in a battle of unsigned 2025 wings. Aaron Gutman for Walton Verona and Donovan Walaskowski for St. Xavier. That's the most intriguing individual matchup in that game. Then Covington Catholic takes on Akron St. Vincent St. Mary. Those are two private school powerhouses in their region. St. V has a new look team this year, but they took down Lutheran West, and their only loss is by 2 to Bishop Gorman out of Las Vegas. I know DeCarlo Prince had a big game against Bishop Gorman, so it'll be interesting to see how the Irish fare. It's basically going to be a road game for them, traveling about 3 hours compared to Covington Catholic going about 15 minutes across state lines. And then defending CMAC champion Cincinnati Aiken, they take on Louisville Ballard. Aiken is led by senior guard duo Jaden Arnold and James Burnett. They're already 5-0 on the season. And finally, on Saturday, host McNicholas takes on Purcell Marion. Sophomore Grant Waters is third in the GCL co-ed in scoring. He's one of the elite shooters in Cincinnati's 2027 class, and he'll be met, like I mentioned earlier, by Purcell Marion's Chris Washington, who's one of the top scorers in Ohio's 2027 class. And finally, we got the Coach Q QP Classic. Two marquee games here. Ottawa Glandorf takes on Spencerville in a rematch of their classic overtime district final, where Ottawa Glandorf came out on top. Spencerville head coach Kevin Sensabaugh won his 300th career game last week. I think Spencerville might be a state title contender in the new 7-division format. And finally, host Lima Senior takes on Oregon Clay. Spartans are 3-1 with their lone loss coming to Toledo Whitmer by 4 on the road. And that brings us to our players and teams of the week. TJ, why don't you get started with your player of the week?
Before we get into that, man, can we talk about how that environment is going to be for that OG Spencerville game?
Unbelievable.
Man, I tell this story, and I probably told it on here before, but I remember I went to a Findlay Ottawa Glandorf game. This was probably 2019, 2020. It was like Saturday, and game was slated to tip at like 4:30 p.m. I get there at about 4:15. I'm thinking it's just going to be a light day. Oh my God, man! I had to park about a mile away. It felt like it was freezing cold. I felt like SpongeBob when he was delivering that one pizza outside. So it was nuts. I think the fact that these two teams, had such a good game last year, and both teams, I'm assuming, travel really well. Obviously, we know OG does. So that'll be fun. I'd like to see, good environments on neutral floors. For my player of the week, though, I went with a kid who caught some people off guard a few weeks ago when he committed early as a junior to Ohio University. Shout out to Michael Roth, the most famous alumni from there. But yeah, man, shout out to X, man. He scored a career high 27 points against Trotwood Madison, which turned out to be a track meet, right? As expected. He also dished out 8 assists, had 4 steals. And he's a kid who is really trending in the right direction. I think he's made a pretty significant jump from a year ago to today. I think his ability to, make some plays on the ball, also being a versatile, scoring option that can step aside and, shoot off the catch or attack closeouts. He gives them a different dimension when he's playing like this that I don't believe they had last year. So shout out to X, shout out to Reynoldsburg. Reynoldsburg, they're still undefeated, right?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, I saw a tweet from Fleer. I believe there was maybe only three or four teams in Central Ohio's Division One that were undefeated. So that's kind of rare because usually at this point, man, there's like still a pretty, significant list of teams that haven't lost yet. I think the fact that, we've already seen so many teams already lose a game or two, just kind of goes to show you the parity that I think we have in Ohio right now. But
Absolutely. For my player of the week, I went with Trey Perry out of Lakota East. the Miami of Ohio commit. So we got a little Ohio Miami of Ohio rivalry here with our players of the week. Last week, Perry fueled the Thunderhawks to two tough conference victories, scoring 31 points at Oak Hills and 36 points at home against Middletown. Lakota East is playing well. They're not the most talented team outside of Trey Perry, but you give Clint Atkins a bunch of kids who are going to play hard and a point guard like Trey Perry who can flat out score the basketball, a great leader on the court as well. I'm not surprised to see Lakota East outperforming their talent to start the season. And then I'm going to go with my team of the week. TJ, do you have any idea where Coshocton, Ohio is?
Oh man, I hate that you put me on the spot. I feel like I see the Coshocton exit um, a pretty decent amount, but if you had to pay me to to put a pin on a map, boy, man, I'd be broker than I am now. Um, so yeah, I have no clue.
I don't think it's too far off 77, probably about 45 minutes north of Zanesville. So
Oh,
there's your geography quiz for the day. But my team of the week is the Coshocton Redskins. They are the only unbeaten team in the Muskingum Valley League. Senior guard Colton Conkle has been excellent to start the season. He scored 24 points in a 2-point win over John Glenn. Conkle was also a player I got to see on the prep hoop circuit this summer. He's getting recruited by various regional Division III schools. Going to be a really solid small college point guard. And Coshocton is averaging 77.5 points per game through their first 4 games this season, getting up and down, scoring the basketball. Shout out the MVL. You got teams like Tri Valley. Their only loss is to Columbus, St. Francis de Sales. Maysville, we obviously know about them making it to the state championship last year. And also, you look at New Lexington, they started the year 0-2 in conference play, picked up a win at Steubenville. So, shout out the Muskingum Valley League, my favorite under the radar conference in all of Ohio. Shout out Coshocton, my team of the week.
oh, back-to-back weeks, man. I'm showing a little bias here, going with Stark County teams. Last week it was a Lion for my team of the week. I'm going with the Massillon Washington Tigers. Shout out to my guy, Coach Hose over there. They got off to a late start due to football, but they've already won 2 games, picked up big victories over Uniontown Green, and then Menor this past weekend at the Hall of Fame Hardwood Classic. Senior Chris Knight and sophomore Giorgio Jackson Jr. combined for 50 points in the win over Menor. Man, it makes me realize how old I'm getting, man, when I see names of players of guys that I went to school with, right? And it's like it's funny. But shout out to Geo Jackson Senior and Junior. And Massillon is a team, always have a ton of dual sport guys. But they were really young last year. I know they brought a lot of people back. Senior Chris Knight can flat out score the ball, really shoots it. I think he showed some of that in AAU with TMBA Ohio. So yeah, keep an eye on Massillon.
They were definitely an underrated team in the preseason. Look at some of their talent, their ability to score the basketball, the amount of football athletes they have. They're going to be a team that I think keeps rising in Northeast Ohio this year. And we're going to wrap up this show with our alumni spotlight players. I'm going to start my Division I player of the week, Claron Hornbeak from Toledo St. Francis. He's playing at Kent State. Golden Flashes are 2-0 in the month of December, and Hornbeak is averaging 12.5 points and 6.5 rebounds per game this month, shooting 57% from the floor. Kent State's 5 leading scorers are all Ohio high school alumni. Very few programs at the Division I level recruit Ohio better than Kent State. So shout out the Golden Flashes. They should be one of the best teams in the Mid-American Conference once again this year. TJ, who's your Division I player of the week?
My Division I pick is EJ Farmer, who actually started his career out at Toledo, who is now playing at Youngstown State, graduate of Cleveland Heights High School. Also spent some time at Lutheran East, so he's been a bit of a journeyman. Shout out to EJ. But he had a chance to play against his former team when they played Toledo. He finished with a team high 20 points. He's seen like a major uptick in his minutes from the start of the season to now. And as a result, he's actually eclipsed the 20-point mark 4 times this year. He's kind of hitting that stride. So we like to see it. Shout out to the staff over at Youngstown State, and shout out to EJ Farmer.
Yeah, definitely a good call. Seems like the Horizon League has had a solid start to their season. They picked up some solid non-conference victories. For my small college alumni spotlight player of the week, I went with Jair Knight from St. Edward. He's playing at Emory down in Atlanta, and Emory is ranked number one in the country for Division Three. Knight is scoring 21 points per game and grabbing 7 rebounds a contest as well, shooting almost 50% from the floor, putting up those numbers for the number one team in the country. An easy pick for my small college player of the week. Shout out to Jair, a kid who knew what he wanted academically, found out a great program in Emory, and Jair has helped them elevate to new heights after being a perennial contender in their conference and making tournament runs. He's got them number one in the country. Pretty awesome stuff. Shout out Jair. Shout out to the St. Edward program. And TJ, you got another pair of Canton area guys for your small college player of the week.
I know I just got this whole Stark County thing going on. But just something to add on to the Jair Knight pick. If anyone just wants a fresh perspective on Division III basketball, please, for the love of God, go watch that kid's highlight tape and just see how freaky athletic he is, how hard he plays, right? We saw some of that senior year at Eds, but just a big time kid. And I'm happy for him. Emory is one of the better academic programs in the country. I think the fact that they're number one, right, in basketball right now in Division III, I think is awesome. For my two picks, I went with Quentin Tolles, graduate of Massillon Perry, who is now at Kentucky Wesleyan. He's been a little bit of a journeyman himself as well. He started off at Walsh, did 1 year at Lynn down in Florida, and then due to a coaching change, went in the portal again. But seems to really have found himself a home at Kentucky Wesleyan. They went 2-0 last week, capped off with a big win on the road at Ashland. Toll scored a game high 29 points. He shot 12 of 18 from the field and 4 of 7 from three in the big win. But man, you want to talk about somebody who just kind of went off. Shout out to freshman Ja'Cory Lipkins over at the D2 Charleston. He was a graduate of Glen Oak just last year, but he scored 42 points in a 103-94 win over Wheeling. He shot just 1 of 11 from the field the game before that, right? So I think for a freshman to, come off like a subpar game and then turn around and have probably the best game of his basketball career, let alone college career so far. I think that's awesome. Shout out to Coach Long, who's in his first year over there, and the rest of the staff. Man, and to do that in the Mountain East too, man, we know the Mountain East is an absolute gauntlet, of a conference at the Division II level, especially at the top. So the fact that a freshman can play in that league, let alone do what Ja'Cory just did, I think that's pretty big time.
Yeah, not just a freshman, an 18-year-old freshman who's probably one of the youngest players in the country. Ja'Cory's doing big time things. I think he's going to have an excellent college career. And that will wrap it up for this episode of The Drive to Dayton. Make sure to come back next week. We'll have recaps on all of the Christmas tournament events that we previewed this week. I'm going to have even more guests as the season moves on. So make sure you like and subscribe and stay tuned to The Drive to Dayton as we take you across the state of Ohio on our journey to the state championship.